Welcome to NK Unfolds, a solo storytelling podcast where every episode weaves a new narrative. I hope the stories I share will inspire, entertain, and maybe even challenge your perspective. So sit back, relax, and let's unfold a new story together. The envelope of letters. This one starts with a woman named Claire. Claire had lived in the same little neighborhood for most of her life, in a house that had belonged to her grandmother. It was an old house, creaky and full of memories, but it was home, and she loved it, even if the upkeep was a little much sometimes. It was the kind of house you'd pass on the street and just know there were stories inside. This page was directed by Claire, Caroline's sister, and she is the main character of the book, with heavy elegance and deadly points. One afternoon, Claire was cleaning out the attic, something she'd been meaning to do for ages. The attic was filled with forgotten treasures, old boxes of photographs, dusty furniture, and yellowed letters tied up with string. It was easy to get lost in the past when surrounded by so many memories. But as she was sorting through the piles, something caught her eye. It was a thick, faded envelope, hidden beneath a pile of old journals. The envelope was addressed to her grandmother, but it wasn't from a family member. The sender's name was unfamiliar, and it had been postmarked from a small town across the country. Curious, Claire opened the envelope and found several letters inside, each dated from the late 1940s. The letters were written in elegant handwriting, full of life and stories that seemed so distant but also so vivid. The first one she read started like this. "My dearest Eleanor, I'm not sure when I will see you again, but please know I carry your heart with me everywhere I go." Claire couldn't stop reading. The letters were from someone named Thomas, and from the way he wrote, it was clear that he loved her grandmother deeply. As Claire read, she learned that Thomas had been a soldier during World War II, and he and her grandmother Eleanor had met while he was stationed in their town. Their love story was beautiful but tragic. He was sent overseas, and though they wrote each other constantly, their plans for the future were interrupted by time and distance. What struck Claire was how her grandmother had kept all of these letters. She'd saved each one with such care, as if the mere act of preserving the words was enough to hold on to that love. Claire read letter after letter, each one a piece of the past. She was completely captivated by the way Thomas wrote about Eleanor, his deep affection, his longing to return home, the way he spoke about his dreams of a life together after the war. But then, as Claire reached the final letter, something stopped her. The last letter was different. It was dated the day before Thomas was supposed to return home. It read, "My darling Eleanor, I'm afraid I have some news. It breaks my heart to tell you that I will not be coming back. I have been called to a new assignment, one I cannot refuse. But know this, you are always in my thoughts. I will love you forever, even if I never get to hold you in my arms again. You are my heart, my soul. Please do not wait for me. Live your life, love others, and know that you are everything to me." Claire sat there, staring at the letter for a long time. She didn't know what happened to Thomas after that. Did he come home? Did he survive the war? She had no idea, and neither did her grandmother, who had passed away years earlier. But as Claire sat with the letters in her hands, something unexpected happened. She felt this overwhelming urge to find out what had happened to Thomas. Why, she wasn't sure. Maybe it was the way his words had felt so real, so full of longing. Maybe it was because, for some reason, this stranger felt connected to her, even after all these years. She decided to follow the trail, not knowing what she would uncover. Claire tracked down the small town where Thomas had lived, and through some research, she found an old address. But when she arrived, it wasn't a house or an apartment that awaited her. It was an old cemetery on the outskirts of town, and there, tucked away near the back of the cemetery, was a headstone with the name Thomas Crawford etched in it. Below his name was a simple inscription. Forever in love with Eleanor, Claire's heart skipped a beat. She had found him, but the story didn't end there. As she stood in front of his grave, Claire felt a presence behind her. She turned and saw an elderly man, his face weathered but kind. He smiled at her, and for some reason, he knew who she was, invigorated and happy again. "I'm Thomas's brother," the man said. "I was the one who had to tell Eleanor the news after the war. She never stopped loving him." And just like that, Claire learned the last piece of the puzzle. Thomas had survived the war, but he had been called away to a different assignment, one he never returned from. Eleanor had lived the rest of her life with the hope that one day Thomas would walk through her door, but he never did. The man handed Claire a small, worn-out notebook. "This is for you," he said. "It's something your grandmother never got to read." Inside was a final letter from Thomas, written just before his death, meant for Eleanor, but it had never been sent. Claire left the cemetery that day, holding both the letter and the notebook. She didn't know how she would ever be able to share all of this with her grandmother, but she realized that maybe she didn't need to. The love story between Thomas and Eleanor had never truly ended. It had just taken a different form, a different kind of legacy. And as Claire drove home, she understood that sometimes love isn't just about having everything in front of you. Sometimes it's about the way you hold on to the pieces, even when the rest of the world doesn't understand why. I love how this story weaves together love, mystery, and discovery. It's a reminder that sometimes life has a way of bringing us back to the past when we least expect it, showing us that some things, like love and memories, never really fade away. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the novel and how it resonated with you. Let's continue the conversation. Stay tuned for more episodes where we explore the world of literature and the lessons it teaches us. Until next time, keep unfolding the stories that matter.